When we're feeling anxious or depressed, or really in any way that we don't know how to handle, it's completely normal that we ask why. Why is this happening? Because we hope that if we can answer that question, we can figure out how we can stop it, what we can do to change things for the better. And whilst this is a completely understandable question, and at times may be useful in certain ways, the trouble with the question is that it looks to the past to change the future. We look at what could have been all the conditions that have led to this so that we can somehow skip over what's happening right now to get to some imagined future that we want to be in. And whilst that's a completely understandable thing to want, the trouble with it is that it ignores the present moment, what's happening right now. And sometimes with mindfulness, you hear a lot about the present moment, and it can sound sort of magical or wonderful or quite romantic in a way. But actually, it's very practical, an orientation to what's happening right now, because that's actually the only time, now is the only time, where we can actually do something to effect useful change. And so if we ignore what's happening right now, what's happening right now is the only thing we can really engage with. So if we ignore that, actually we're caught in a kind of process of dreaming and fantasy and hoping, and it all stays in the realm of thinking about stuff, which, whilst on the one hand can drive our emotions, so that's not so helpful, but also it completely disempowers us from our capacity to engage helpfully with what's happening. And so an orientation to what's happening right now is truly a practical thing. But, of course, there are good reasons why we don't want to do that. It's uncomfortable, can be scary. We don't know quite how to handle what's happening right now. That's why we're asking all these questions. And so it's reasonable to have a hesitancy around that, and helpful to consider, well, how can we do this in a way that's safe, where we're not going to get overwhelmed? And so absolutely important to consider that. But this orientation to the present moment, which you hear so much about with mindfulness, is really a practical thing. It's not a romantic notion, although it sometimes gets dressed up in that way. It's really, how can we empower ourselves to usefully engage? And so this is the first step, perhaps just having the idea that this might be something worthwhile. And then, of course, the next steps are, okay, well, how do I do that in a way that doesn't freak me out, overwhelm me, spin me out in some way? And so that's the next step, very important question. But for now, particularly if you're new to all of this, maybe just to consider that there may be something worthwhile in, beginning to ask the question, well, what's happening right now? Kind of letting the questions of why rest just for a time, and to be curious. And curiosity is so helpful, a curiosity that's not trying to fix. Some curiosity is just trying to find the answer, but there's another kind of curiosity that's really interested. Okay, well, what does this feel like in the body, for example? And, this is one of the reasons that things like feeling your feet on the floor or the sense of breathing can be so helpful, because as we start to experience this stuff, it's like, whoa, this can be a bit much. So, feeling the feet, the sense of breathing can be a real resource, not to cover over what we're experiencing, but just to steady us enough so that we can start to get a sense, okay, if we take anxiety, it's like, well, what does that feel like in the body? Does it have a shape, a certain sense of movement? And there's just one possibility of a way we can start to get a sense of what's happening right now. And that's not the end of the story with all of this, but just the beginning of a slightly different orientation that over time can prove really helpful. Okay, hope that was helpful, useful in some way. If you have any comments or questions, do let me know. All right, take care.